Welcome to mmlearn.org. This is the first part of my spiritual journey. My name is Chaplain Marta Peña. I am one of the chaplains here at Morningside. Welcome. This class is called Spiritual Journey, which deals with the journey that we all take on this life, on this earth. Life was intended to be connected. We live life connected, life in relationships. We start in our life connected. A fetus is connected to its mother. Pregnancy ends at the when the uterine attachment is broken. Our first experience of transition, our first journey towards this earth, starts as we are separated and begin the turbulent journey down the canal as we are expelled from the womb. And it is our first, some argue, emotional disturbance that we go through. This is how we all start our journey. We start out attached in a nice warm womb where life is kind of calm and normal. And then we have a separation and a journey turbulently as we are expelled, as if to say, welcome to the world. Separation at birth is necessary. It is necessary for the continuation of human life. And life, from that point forward, is one big transition. Another word for transition is change. We are ever changing, ever evolving, ever being renewed. We are transitioning. Life is meant to be lived as a transition, attachment and separation. Our lives are full of attachment and separation. We start out life attached, and then we are separated. It is necessary for our survival and our life to be attached, to have attachments. But attachments to any one thing does not last forever. And so eventually there comes separation. We were created to be connected. Not only do we start connected in our lives, and then once we are born, the immediate thing that a newborn baby does is it's put into its mother's arms. And there is a very important process that goes on. It is the attachment, the bonding between now a baby and the physical mother on the outside. The attachment of the baby to its parents. And then soon they learn as children to grow and walk. And then they spend the rest of their life trying to separate from their parents. Teenagers spend their life trying to spread their wings and fly and be their own person. Parents often struggle with this as children grow up and leave the nest. That's what we call empty nester syndrome. We were created to be connected not only physically, but spiritually and emotionally. Every attachment that we have in life is a physical and a spiritual and emotional attachment. And it's not compartmentalized, for we are a whole being, a whole person. And so this is how one begins their life and one continues their life. Now, the spiritual end of this is that the first not good, and I will speak from the Christian perspective here, but it has meaning no matter what faith journey you're on. The first not good was that Adam should be alone, that man, Adam means man in Hebrew, should be alone. For God did not create us to be alone, but created us to be connected. He created us to be connected to Him, connected to the earth. And then He said, but He needs another connection. And so God created a partner. And the partner was where we were created to live interdependent, to live and be good stewards, and to live and support one another, and to live in and through relationships. There is no life outside of relationships and connection. There is no life without transition, and there is no life without grief and loss. Because eventually, once one is connected, one must be separated. Each of us inside have a desire to be loved and cared for. It is fundamental to our human nature. And our capacity to love and to be loved is the remaining mark of God in us. For God loves us. The image of God is the ability to be loved, one said, and to be good stewards. And so as we go through this life, we live in a transitional state in which we form attachments and in which those relationships, because they do not last forever, end. In our lives, we experience the joys of an attachment, which is always uncomfortable. When you think of a new couple first getting married, that first year is often the hardest transition, because even in good things, it is very, very difficult to get used to being and living with another person. It creates a transition. Then two people live together and they form their lives, but because attachments don't last forever, there eventually to all relationships comes an end. And to this, we have a hard time when it comes time for the separation. Our life is lived in full circle. We are not meant to be isolated and to live on an island of our own. We are meant to be connected. And there is importance in the connection of others. Our spiritual journey is a relationship with one another. Our relationship starts with our parents and then goes to friends and to a spouse, maybe, children. We live the full circle of relationships. And these relationships give meaning to our lives as we develop as a person. The one most important person in my life was my grandmother. The love and the nurture that I got from my grandmother, that relationship benefited me through my whole life. The love and the spiritual nurturing that I received from her, it was foundational my entire life. When my grandmother died when I was 16 years old, that was my first experience of separation. I did not deal very well with that. I had a very, very hard time thinking that my grandmother was no longer able to be there for me. I found it very difficult to say goodbye. I often had dreams that I would see her in a mall, and we'd always go shopping at that point because I was 16. And I'd be running through the store, "Grandma, Grandma, it's me," and I'd never quite catch up with her. It's funny how years later, about 10 years later, when my grandfather died, and we were burying him right next to my grandmother. And I stood there, and they uncovered the hole, and I looked down in the hole, and I knew next to that hole was and I thought, that's not my grandmother. But there was closure in that moment. My grandmother lives in me. And then there was my little girl. Her name was Teresa. She has the exact name as my grandmother. And she traced her name, Teresa, with her finger. And she said, "Mommy, this is me." And I realized at that moment that the love that I experienced from my grandmother, that because of that relationship, because it is not good for us to be disconnected, It is good for us to have relationships and be connected. That love continued on. That love that I received continued on in my little girl. And now she bears the name of my grandmother and the love she gets from me. It's a cycle that continues to grow. That's why we were meant to be in relationship. And all of the pain that I had experienced and all of that separation was a journey that I was working through. It's funny. I have rings. These rings are my grandmother's rings. They were given to me after she passed away, about 5 years after. And I was in the hospital room visiting someone who was very, very ill. And they asked if I'd pray with them, and I grasped their hands, and we said a prayer together. I looked down at my hands, and I saw my grandmother's hands, and I saw Christ's hands, and I saw my hands. And I realized that relationships go on, that the connection and the relationships we have in our life, the relationships with our parents, with our children, that love continues to grow and form us. And even those relationships that didn't turn out as well as my grandmother's, and we all have those relationships have helped form me and my spiritual journey as we grow. That I learned through the diversity and the failing of those relationships about the significance of relationships and connection and how what we learn grows with us as we evolve and renew and transition into new people. And it's funny, I hear sometimes at Morningside, our older adults, they have to sell their homes. They have to downsize considerably. And one time I heard somebody say, well, it's only stuff. And I thought, no. Inside of me I wanted to scream, no, it's not just stuff. If it's somebody's home where they raised their children, where they grew, there's an emotional attachment to that physical stuff. There is a separation and a grieving process that's going on here. It's like my grandmother's rings. They don't mean a whole lot as far as money-wise. I mean, I may be able to get a couple of $100 from them. Somebody stole them from me. They may only be able to get a couple of $100. But they have value and meaning for what they represent. They represent the emotional and spiritual attachment that I had to my grandmother. That is no different for an older person who feels a certain attachment to an object or their house because of what it represents. We all go through these attachments and separations, and they have special meaning. And stuff isn't just stuff. For we, as people, form attachments to something. Sometimes we don't understand why we love something so much. And it's not the object that we love so much as what it represents. And so we go through series attachments. It's the desire for this to attach and unattach is important because it grows us. And it's a whole spiritual journey as we take it. And we're really not alone. We have this understanding in America that we are to be independent and strong, that I don't need anybody. And the truth of the matter was we were not created to be independent. We were not created to be able to stand on our own. We were created to be interdependent, for we were given one another. There's a desire to be connected to God, to have that spiritual connection to our Creator. That, I think, is inside each one of us. We have that desire to be connected. We also have that desire to be connected with one another. As human people, we wish to be loved and to be cared for, and we wish to love other people and be cared for other people. We all start out that way. Now, sometimes on our journey, certain things may cause us to have hard hearts, for us to be hurt. Hurting people sometimes hurt others. But we don't start out that way. Most of us have a desire to love and to be loved, to care and to be cared for. The more I live this life, the more I realize there are more good people, more loving people, than there are anything else. People desire to be loved. Some people may call me a dreamer, but I believe that is true. Looking at the faces of young children that are just born, they desire to be loved and cared for, and they want to love back. They not only want you to love them, they want to love back. Each one of us has this desire in us. And so we were meant to be in relationship and to be connected. And we have this understanding, well, I'm afraid to be dependent. I don't want to be dependent on anybody. Nobody wants to be dependent. And I think that's a misunderstanding. There are some things in my life, even now, I'm dependent on another for. There are some aspects of my life that the people depend on me for. It's a give and take. It's an interdependence. I call them my surrogate parents. They are like parents to me. They adopted me probably about 15 years ago. And if ever I need anything, I know that their love and support will be there for me. There are certain things in which, when I'm having a really bad day, I always say, her name's Dixie, I need a Dixie hug. And in a way, I am, in some way, dependent upon the emotional support that I get from her. And she, in some way, is dependent upon me for the support that I give her. That's what we call interdependence. And it's interesting, we tend to go to extremes, dependent or independent or dependent, when really it's more middle. Attachment, separation, we go through this process in order to form as people. Now it's interesting, as we look at our lives and we journey back, our lives are made up of relationships, separation and attachment. And if I ask you, how many of you out there would like a really smooth life? That you would prefer that everything was really smooth, that you really want a smooth sailing life? And if all of you are shaking your head, yes, right now, I'm going to tell you you don't want that. And I can prove it to you. And so if you will bear with me, I'm going to prove why you don't want a smooth journey in which you know everything and how everything is going to happen. I'm going to start out with a light, and I'm going to place the light right here. And if I'm going to use symbolism and metaphors. If we have a plain, simple journey, then we're going to look at glass bowls. Okay? So if we had a smooth life, then our life would be like this plain glass bowl. It's smooth. It doesn't have anything in it particular. It's just smooth. I guess it's pretty. You hold it up to the light and the light reflects off pretty. Now we've already established that no one can enter this world, welcome to the earth, without being born. So unfortunately, even if you had a smooth life, you'd still have to have some emotional turbulence as you entered this world. So there's your birth. And then everything was smooth. By the way, you could have no relationships. Because remember, you cannot be attached to anyone except for God. You cannot be attached to any person or thing without having to be separated from it eventually. So your life would be smooth. And it's not particularly pretty. We can put the glass. I like the light. And the light shines in all our darknesses. I love the beginning of the Gospel of John and the symbolism of the light. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. And the Word was God, and He was in the beginning. And He is the light that shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. And so since the same light of God shines in all of us, if we put it in our plain bowl, well, it looks a little bit better. Now, I'm going to say that most of us, none of us, because it is not possible for us to be a plain bowl. But most of us have lived a spiritual journey in which we know separation, we know loss, we know what it means to be loved, we know what it means to feel and experience our first love, and then to experience the disappointment when our first love didn't turn out like we thought our first love would turn out. We know what it means to dream and have things turn out a little bit different. We know what it means to lose important people in our lives. So, of course, our birth is important, so that would be the star. And if you notice the crystal bowl, we are like the crystal bowl. As you notice in the crystal bowl, it is cut glass. And some of them have some pretty good pits in them. Some of them are wide pits, deep pits. And that represents all the pits in our life, all the times of diversity in our journey, separation. Some of them are long and smooth. But notice how beautiful the crystal bowl is. You don't even need to shine the light on the crystal bowl to see the beauty. And the light that shines when it hits the certain cracks looks beautiful. I like to tell my residents that they are the crystal bowl. In fact, I tell them they are the full crystal bowl. A life well lived in all of its adversity and diversity, in its calm points, smooth points. They are the crystal bowl. I tell them that I'm the halfway crystal bowl. I'm still forming. They're still forming too. But they've got a lot more beauty and years on me, a lot more experience and wisdom. And that they would much rather be the crystal bowl instead of the glass bowl. And that in the time when God's light and the light of their life and spirit shines, it shines more beautifully and brilliantly through the crystal bowl. And that life, a life lived, a spiritual journey, is that of the making of a crystal bowl.